tragically silly oxymoron: beneficial brainwashing. Hidden among its most sensitive files were CIA records documenting a project called MK Ultra.
D. Lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD.
For brainwashing research by Dr. Ewan Cameron.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our new series where we're going to talk about the real horrors of our everyday reality. Now join us as we lift open the curtain of society and we see what darkness hides beneath it. On this episode, we'll be talking about the American government and the sick and twisted experiments they performed on the American public right under everyone's noses. That project would be known as MK Ultra. Imagine a government meant to protect its own people, but instead abuses its power and authority to hurt its own citizens, all to satisfy and quench their thirst for their own morbid and sick curiosities. Just imagine a government capable of manipulating and conducting sick experiments in the middle of your hometown, right in plain sight without anyone being the wiser. Now what if I told you that you don't have to imagine it at all, and that it was and is our current reality? Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Hidden among its most sensitive files were CIA records documenting a project called MK Ultra.
So MK Ultra was an illegal government mind control program that went on from 1953 and supposedly ended in 1973. It was formed by the CIA, and their aim was to break the minds of people, making them force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. They would use extremely high doses of many kind of psychoactive drugs, mostly LSD, to manipulate man's brain, and they were doing this without the subject even knowing what was going on, and definitely without the subject consenting to any of the horrible torture. They used many other methods, including electroshock, hypnosis, all kinds of assault. They would put them in sensory deprivation chambers, and they would isolate the patients from the outside world for extended periods of time. Alan Dulles, the director of the CIA at the time, approved this project in response to the Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean government's use of mind control tactics on their own citizens and their U.S. prisoners.
Of the American prisoners of war in Korea, how they seem to have been brainwashed.
Years after World War II, there was major paranoia about communists infiltrating the U.S., which put the government in a panic to protect American culture from a Soviet takeover. This led the CIA to expand their experimental methods as well, with absolutely no oversight or any accountability for their actions. The CIA hired a man named Sidney Gottlieb to head the whole operation of MK Ultra. And this man was a monster in his own right. He was an expert American chemist, along as spy master. And he's the one who led this morbid crusade for man's mind. Shortly after beginning their work, Gottlieb and Dulles both believed they could find the key to global domination and mind control through the MK Ultra project. They would even attempt a pursuit in making a truth serum during the Cold War. They began with their team testing their theories and hypothesis on unwitting American citizens. They had over 80 institutions, including universities, colleges, hospitals, prisons, and even pharmaceutical companies that were involved in these experiments.
D. Lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. It is colorless, tasteless, odorless. One of a whole family of hallucinogens, both natural and synthetic, that includes STP, peyote, mescaline, psilocybin. LSD is the most powerful of all.
They started out by drugging them with LSD in social settings without the victim's knowledge or consent. Sometimes the test subjects would know they were participating in a study, but others had no idea, even when the hallucinogens would start taking effect on their body. The ones who could give their consent, however, were way worse off than the ones who couldn't. They were put through brutal psychological horrors. The agency itself admitted that the people they had working for them who were conducting the early experiments were not even qualified for the job, and their methods made absolutely no sense. Many believe that they were just entertaining their own sick pleasures. CIA documents also suggest that they used radiation on people to achieve a form of mind control, and if you look around you today, you see nothing but 4 and 5G cell phone towers everywhere, and they spew nothing but radiation and frequencies into our population.
Exposed to the program of chemical and electroshock treatment.
Experimental drugs, including LSD, were administered to human guinea pigs. The patients were never told that their treatment was part of a CIA experiment.
Now I want to give you a glimpse into the sick mind of Gottlieb. He would regularly abuse his illegally acquired participants and patients and put them through absolute hell. He would acquire a profile on them through giving them a psychiatric therapy session, record the whole thing, then confine them into a straitjacket into a sensory deprivation room, all while be giving copious amounts of LSD. He would play the tape loops of their most degrading statements of themselves from the therapy session on repeat, over and over and over. There was even a case of them giving a patient acid for 69 days straight, destroying the man's mind. All while Gottlieb would take LSD in his office for fun, locking himself in there, madly taking notes all day long. Other forms of their mind control and torture experiments included them connecting a drip IV of barbiturates, which is a heavy downer drug, into one of the patient's arms, and an amphetamine IV, which is an upper, into the other arm. They would let the barbiturates take effect and the victim would start to nod out and fall asleep from the drugs. As soon as they would begin to pass out, they would unleash the amphetamines into their system, resulting in them jerking awake. It was sometimes possible to extract useful information out of the patient, but they didn't use this process long, because most of the time it would stop the victim's heart and make getting further information out of them impossible. Because of this, they stopped using this method. Other experiments also included heroin, mescaline, psilocybin, scopolamine, marijuana, alcohol, and sodium pentothal. Keep in mind, these are all common street drugs today. These people were monsters. Another one of MKUltra's projects was called Operation Midnight Climax. This was a project where the CIA would have government-employed prostitutes and have said prostitutes lure unsuspecting men into these brothel houses. These brothel houses were known as CIA safe houses, and here they would conduct even more horrific drug experiments. The CIA would dose these men with LSD, all while they are video recording everything and secretly watching behind a two-way mirror and drinking cocktails, seeing how the man would react to the drugs. One of the agents involved in Operation Midnight Climax was named George White. He would write a letter to Gottlieb in 1971. I will read the letter to you right now. Quote, George White. Of course I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun, fun, fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy live, kill, cheat, steal, deceive, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest? In December of 1974, the New York Times did a reporting on the project, saying the CIA was illegally conducting these experiments on our own U.S. citizens in the 60s. This report ended up having the U.S. Congress known as the Church Committee at the time, and the Rockefeller Commission to do an investigation on the matter. But as it turns out, the CIA was obviously trying to keep this a secret and didn't want anyone knowing about these experiments. Earlier in 1972, the director of the CIA at that time, Richard Helms, panicked and deliberately destroyed most of the MKUltra documents, all in an attempt to keep people from finding out their sick experiments on these innocent people. Doing this would make a full investigation impossible, but they ended up finding a stash of 20,000 documents that survived incorrectly stored in a financial records building, and ended up being discovered and investigated. They say that there were more than 150 funded projects sponsored by MKUltra and related programs. Gottlieb was later interviewed by the Church Committee, and he claimed that he had very little recollection about what happened during MKUltra.
It wasn't treatment, if that's what you're suggesting. It wasn't treatment for anything, not a toenail or anything. It was out and out guinea pigs for brainwashing experiments. That's what it was.
There were apparently thousands of people that had to undergo these gruesome experiments led out by Gottlieb and the CIA. After word got out that the CIA was being investigated for these horrible acts, many victims and survivors decided to sue and file lawsuits on the government for legal compensation. The government somehow managed to weasel their way out of the liability for these heinous acts, and sometimes even successfully tried to avoid legal liability for these actions on these innocent people. A lot of people, but not all, thankfully, did end up getting compensated. And as far as we can find, no one involved in MKUltra has ever received any repercussion for these actions against defenseless citizens. So there's no evidence that the CIA and the MKUltra project really did succeed in brainwashing the mind of man. Gottlieb ended up retiring in 1972 and just gave up on MKUltra, saying it was useless. Since then, the CIA says that MKUltra type experiments have been discontinued, or has it just begun? With everything in our modern day to 5G towers and copious amounts of drugs in our city streets, nothing but news repeating negativity and tragedy into your ears. Who can really say that MKUltra has ceased to function? Maybe if you believe your government is incapable of doing such things to its citizens, then maybe they really have seized control of the human mind.